So I don't have a lot of experience with Stihl 4 mix. This is honestly the first one I've worked on right here. This goes on a BR600 blower. But I was looking at it, and there's actually a replacement cylinder for one that came in. And when you ask your local dealer and they kind of laugh about them, this ain't a great sign. You look on the old internet and there's dozens of used cylinders, and you go, this ain't good. But you're able to find one pretty cheap. It shows up and you open it up, and that's a scattered bottom end, which in this case isn't going to hurt anything. But those of y'all that aren't familiar with them, it's basically a 4-stroke motor that runs with 2-stroke mix. And this is the cam, single lobe plastic. And that's not really a huge problem. Honda does that in the GC 160 motors and some stuff like that. It's pretty slick design. There's a couple springs in there and a weight, and it runs this little knob, and that becomes a decompression when you can start it, and this and that. And that rides on a little pin, and you got 2 lifters that go there and push rod tubes. But the real problem with this motor is it's 4-stroke with no oil. So how do they lube it? And in the words of my good buddy Ron, this is beer engineering. So this is your intake. You have a normal carburetor. When a valve opens, it draws mix through that valve on the left there from this intake. This hole, you can see my finger in there. So some of your intake charge comes up into this valve pocket here. You've got a regular valve cover that goes on it, and you got rocker arms. I mean, it's just like any other motor. So then how do you get fuel from here? It has to come through here. Then it goes down these push rod tubes. Then you got the 2 lifters here running on the cam. They get the first dibs at it. And then you got the cam spinning in here. And then you've got these ports that come through the bottom of the cylinder. And mix is then pushed. It kind of works its way down through here, and that's what lubes the bottom end. But then they have this massive impulse. So this has to be, I haven't really studied it that closely, but this has to be some sort of a loop, that the impulse being that big to run the carb, this is part of a flow to keep things moving through the circuit. But there's no a normal 2-stroke. Your mix comes in here, or comes in right here on the bottom of the skirt. It forces it through the bottom end. Then it goes around the sides, top, and then out. Well, this is kind of it's a hope that it gets some lube off of this, down through the holes, around the cam, down in there, and finally gets to the big end of the crank. It's marginal at best. So if you're thinking about any 4-mix device, I would think long and hard about it. I think the spec I've read so far is these valves have to be run every 50 hours. It's not exactly a terrible job, but it is something that has to be done. And all of these screws are steel screws and aluminum, so the expensive aluminum cylinder is what the screws wear out first, not the screws themselves. And oh yeah, you got to decarbon this thing all the time, because it's hard to see in there, but it's full of carbon. And the 2-stroke oil doesn't really run the same in these, so you got to use a really good synthetic, and it does not run really well. It runs these little itty bitty plugs, 10mm plugs. So it's think long and hard before you buy one. Not one of Stihl's better ideas. I'm not a Stihl hater. There's a 201, 200, a bunch of Stihl parts there. I mean, I'm not against Stihl, but 4 mix. Pass on it. Y'all have a good one.